I hope you all would be doing good. And in the previous class, since we have looked on toward the components of the respiratory system, and now from this point onward, we would be seeing that what role or the function every component of the respiratory system is rendering or performing for our body. So we would begin with the first part of the respiratory system, and this is the nose and the nasal cavity. Now, if you were to see like this is the nose that is drawn for you, and the inside we have got this space, and that space would be termed as the nasal cavity, we say. And on the outside of your nose, you have got these openings, and these openings they are termed as external nares, and likewise here on the inside of the nose, we again have got two inside openings, and these are referred to as the internal nares. And you see that one part of the nose that we have here, and the other part of the nose that we have got here, so they both are separated with the help of this part that we have with us. And this is termed as the nasal septum, we say. Now, the other thing is that we must be very much clear about that this nasal, you could say, wall that we have with us, so what would lie here? So this is the other way in which I have shown you the nose. So these are the, you could say, structure of the nose that we have, and in this structure, you could say, wall of the nose that we have. So we would have a lot of blood capillaries in them, and at the same time, we know it well that we have got a lot of hairs that would be present here in the case of the nose, and there are microscopic nerve endings also available, and that would be producing the sneezing thing. The other thing is that the inside of the nose, like if you ever had tried to wipe the nose with the help of the tissue, so when you try to see that tissue, so it looks moist. So on the inside of the nose, we have this moist layer of the water as well, and there would be the presence of this sticky substance that we call this as a mucus. So this would be also available. So these are the components or the things that we have in the nose, and we will see that now what the nose is actually doing. So the hair and the mucus that we have got on the inside of the nose, so it will trap any of the dust particles that we are inhaling. And in our external environment or in our surrounding, there is a chance that there may be a person who may be suffering from some disease. So when he would sneeze, so he is gonna release some droplets, and those droplets that can have a chance of being present or presence of the pathogen. So thanks partly to this hair and the mucus coming, that they would not only be trapping the dust particles, but they would also catch the pathogens. And earlier we have said in this chapter that the purpose of our airways is that this not only has to warm the air up, the inhaled air, and at the same time this also has to moisten the air. And by moistening the air, what I mean is that to the inhaled air, I am required to be adding some content of the water vapors into it. Now, if I were to show you a bigger diagram here, so you see that in the nasal wall, as I've said above, we have got these blood capillaries, and in these blood capillaries, there would be the blood flowing. And in the blood, we know that we have got the heat. And as far as the law of the thermodynamics is concerned, the heat is always transferred from the hotter to a colder body. So you understand as that the air that I'm inhaling in, this might be the cold air. So the heat would get out of these blood capillaries, and this would help to be warming the air up. The other thing is that how can we moisten the air within the nose? So you see that here the inside of the nose, now this has got a thin layer of the water. So this water would a bit of evaporate, a little of this would evaporate. And when this water on the inside of the nose would evaporate, so it would be added up in the inhaled air, and as a result of that, the air that we are inhaling, so this would become moistened, and the time when this is becoming moistened, so our airways they would be prevented from drying out. Okay, so this is why it is written over here that the nasal wall possesses a blood capillaries that has a heat in it, and that heat would be utilized to later moisten the inhaled air and also to be warming up the inhaled air. So here we are done with the first part of the airways, and that was the nose and the nasal cavity. So now let us begin to talk about the second part that I have got in my airways, and this is the pharynx. And we must know that this pharynx is the common passage of the food and air alike. Like if I were to name some of the part of the respiratory system and the digestive system, so in the respiratory system we have the nose, and then there comes the pharynx, and then comes the larynx, and the other components are also available. And if I were to take you into the digestive system, so again we have the mouth, and after the mouth we have got the pharynx coming. So this means that this organ, the pharynx, is shared among these two systems that we have with us. But the role of these two systems is different because the respiratory system is responsible for taking air into your airways, and the digestive system is responsible for taking the food into your stomach and the other small and the large intestines that we have with us. So here you see the situation as that how come we would be in the position to be preventing the entry of this bolus of the food that I have with me. So here comes the pharynx, and at the front of the pharynx you see I have got this trachea, and you could say behind the trachea, now here you see we have got this food pipe. This is the esophagus with us. Now, at the top of the trachea, you see that we have got this larynx, and then at the top of the larynx, we have this slit-like opening. And this slit-like opening is referred to as the epiglottis, we say. So the time when the bolus of the food lies here in the pharynx, so there is a possibility that this bolus of the food can also pass into the airways, and if this would happen, so it is disastrous because this would block your airways and this can choke you up. So, our respiratory system actually has got a way to avoid it. The situation would be that when you try to be ingesting the food up, so this flap-like cartilage that we are referring to this as the epiglottis, so this epiglottis would cover up this larynx or would cover up the trachea. And as a result of that, this bolus would go directly into the esophagus without passing into these airways or into the trachea. But in some cases, small particles of the food they get an entry into the trachea, but at that time my body would initiate very vigorous kind of the coughing, and that would try to eliminate any of the food particles that we have within this trachea that we have got. So if I were to say this, so the issue with the pharynx is that there is a possibility of the food passing into the airways. And the solution is that when you are trying to be swallowing the food, so this epiglottis, it would cover the glottis or the larynx, and in that way, the airways would block up. And when the airways would block up, then as a result of that, the food would go into the esophagus directly. But in some cases, some food particles, they still get an entry into the airways, but at that point, my body would produce vigorous coughing, and when that vigorous coughing is initiated, then any of the food particle that got an entry here, so that would be removed. Now moving onward here, we have got the other part coming. So after the pharynx, we have got this larynx, or this another word is also called as the voice box or the Adam's apple, and this lies immediately below the pharynx. And the role of the larynx is that it has got some specialized vocal cords present in it, and these specialized vocal cords they vibrate. And when they vibrate, so they help to be producing the sound that we produce while we are speaking or shouting or doing an argument with someone. So if there was no larynx, then we would not be able to produce any of the sound. Now, moving onward, like if I were to show you this, that below the larynx, now here comes the trachea. And this is an important point where the examiner would ask you some of the situation out of it. So you see that I have got this trachea coming up, and in the trachea, you see we have got multiple structures, and among the various structures, the first one that I am highlighting for you, so these are the C-shaped rings of the cartilage. As of now, if you were to place your finger here on the trachea, so you would literally feel these C-shaped rings of the cartilage. And then within the trachea, we have got these specialized cells with us, and these specialized cells, they have got some hair-like structures protruding out of them. So they are the cilia. So this overall is a ciliated cell. And here we have got these cilia, and at the same time, we have got another cell present within the trachea, and that renders the duty of producing a sticky substance out of it, and that is what we entitle it as the mucus, we say. So for the trachea, what you need to know is that this is also called as a windpipe, And among the various component that it has in itself, so we have got these C-shaped rings of the cartilage, then we have got these ciliated cells with us, and then we have these goblet cells with us. Now, we must see that how come every part of the trachea would be rendering the role. So if we were to talk about the cartilages that we have got in these trachea, so they would prevent the collapse of the trachea during the breathing. So you see that when we try to inhale the air in and when we try to exhale the air out, so this would involve the pressure difference. And that pressure difference, they can collapse this trachea. This is something we don't want. So, thanks partly to these C-shaped rings of the cartilage present, that they would not allow this trachea to collapse inward when we are breathing the air in and when we are breathing the air out. The other point could be that these C-shaped rings of the cartilage, they would always keep your airways open up so that the respiratory gases, they keep on going inside and outside of the body, we say. Now, as I have said above, that in the trachea we have got these spatial cells coming up with us, and these are the goblet cells. And the role of these goblet cells is that they produce a sticky material out of them, and that sticky material is what we term it as the mucus, we say. And the role of the mucus is that the hairs that we have in the nose, so they would not remove all of the irritant particles or the pathogens. So there is a chance that some dust particles and the pathogens, they would be coming into your trachea, and we would never allow them to go toward the alveoli. We would try to trap them. So the mucus which these goblet cells they have produced, so it would not trap the pathogen or the dust particles in it. So if I were to be telling you the description of the role of the goblet cells, so you would say that they produce a sticky substance, and that sticky substance is termed as or called as the mucus, and this will trap the dust particles and the pathogens. Now, this is also a problem. The presence of the mucus can also lead to some issues. The issue could be that you think of the way that within this trachea, if I keep on accumulating a lot of mucus, so this mucus can naturally be blocking up these airways. And the other idea is that this mucus is a nutritious media in which the pathogens which they have trapped, they can grow in them, and that would cause some diseases of the respiratory system. So the issue with the mucus is, as I've said, that it can clog up the or block up the airways and some pathogens can grow in it. Now, this is something I don't want. Now, from this problem, the solution would be provided by these ciliated cells that we have with us, because these ciliated cells, you see that they have some finger-like projections or the hair-like structure, and they sweep. Okay, they have a flagellating movement. So when we allow them to be doing the flagellating movement, so this mucus would be moved up the trachea, and then it would go to the pharynx, from where we can spit it out or we can ingest it into our stomach, where the hydrochloric acid would digest this off. So if I were to take you to the points of these ciliated cells, so here you see we have got these ciliated cells, and these ciliated cells, they have this flagellating movement, and that would move the mucus up. Okay, and then it would be carried to the pharynx. Now, after the mucus has come into the pharynx, we have got two choices. Like either we can ingest it into the esophagus, from where it would be carried to the stomach, and over there the hydrochloric acid would digest any of the pathogen that we have trapped here in the mucus. And the other choice could be that we can also spit it out. But in most of the scenarios, we are sitting at a place where we would not be able to spit it out, but rather than ingest it. So if I were to show you this diagram, we know that here we have this trachea. So when the mucus is moved up, so there would be pharynx coming. Now either we spit it out or we ingest it here. And from here you see that this mucus is going down the esophagus, and then this is coming into the stomach where the HCl or the hydrochloric acid would digest it off. Now, moving further, you see that this was the trachea with us, and this trachea would now divide into further two small tubes, and they are referred collectively as bronchi. Okay, so this although appears on my left hand side, but I would call this as a right bronchus. This appears on my right hand side, but I would be referring to this airway as the left bronchus because the sides have reverted when we would place this airways on the table to be examining it. So for the bronchus, what we would say is that this trachea would divide to make further two tubes, and they would include the right and the left bronchus, and each of the bronchus that we have, they would take the air into each lobe of the lung. Moving onward, you see that from the bronchus we will get these miniature tubes further developing out of them, and they are the bronchioles. So for the bronchioles, we would say that the bronchi, they further divide and then they make these smaller airways, and these smaller airways, they are referred to as the bronchioles. And you see that from the bronchioles, the air is coming into these air sacs that we have, and these air sacs that fill up with the air and where the gaseous exchange would take place. So these are the alveoli. So for the alveoli, what we would say that the bronchioles that we have got, so they would end up making the smaller air sacs, and these smaller air sacs, they are the alveoli with us. So I hope you would be clear with every component that we have got in the respiratory system. And for the next class, we will see that how come the alveoli that we have here, this would be developed or this would be adapted for the process of the gaseous exchange, where literally we would take the oxygen gas into the blood and we would take the carbon dioxide out of the blood into these alveoli so that we can exhale the CO2 out of our body. So see you in the next class.